Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a US political breaking news update. We're going to be looking at what's been going on with, of course, Donald Trump again, but we are going to be concerning ourselves with a termination of trade negotiations with Canada, and all over an advert that the state of or province of Ontario has produced, an advert that uses Ronald Reagan's words and voice. We're going to look at all of this. It's quite stunning that essentially Donald Trump has had a hissy fit overnight and stopped trade negotiations. My goodness me, he's thin-skinned. So let's have a look at what has happened. As Midas Touch says, Donald Trump just threw a late-night tantrum over an advertisement created by the Canadian province of Ontario, which featured Ronald Reagan's real words expressing the dislike of tariffs. Trump says that as a result, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Donald Trump says on his Truth Social post, the Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake. And by the way, it's not fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. The ad was for $75,000. They only did this to interfere with the decision of the US Supreme Court and other courts. All caps, tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. I mean, if Joffrey Baratheon grew up to be an American president, this is pretty much what it would look like. It's a reference there from Ron Filipkowski to the Game of Thrones. Absolutely incredible. As Joey Politano says, throwing a hissy fit because the Canadians quoted Ronald Reagan at you. What a picture of the modern Republican Party. And this is the advert. As this source says, Trump is having a temper tantrum, ending all trade negotiations with Canada. He's butthurt that they had an ad of President Reagan that shows how dumb Trump's tariffs are. It's very effective. So let's have a look at.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
And that is why Donald Trump has cancelled trade negotiations with Canada. It's absolutely staggering. Here is the original clip of Reagan back from 1987, where he delivered, and there's actually some of it cut out from that, where he delivered a complete and total rebuke against tariffs. Trump is calling Reagan's words in this video fake and fraudulent. They're 100% real, and the original clip is actually far worse for Trump, as much is left out of the ad. Watch the clip and read the full transcript. I'm going to read it through for you rather than watching the clip, but imagine I'm talking in a Reagan voice. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley tariff, greatly deepened the depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is first homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industry shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some its special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs. And on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. Okay, so that is Ronald Reagan speaking very clearly and in a forthright fashion about the challenges that across the board tariffs particularly present. I mean, we can make a case for targeted strategic tariffs to protect a particular industry, but the sorts of tariffs that Trump is imposing upon his electorate, because really they are taxes on his electorate, are very, very dangerous to America's economic prospects. It is exactly, I believe, as Ronald Reagan says here. I think all of his points here are salient. But for, in this case, a province, a Canadian province, or anyone really to say this is not controversial. This is at most a debate over economic policy, right? That Donald Trump and his administration are so thin-skinned that they would have to cancel trade negotiations with a neighboring country over Ronald Reagan's words being used in an advert. It shows just how thin-skinned they are. It is absolutely unconscionable that they would do something so sensitive as this and yet so impactful, negatively impactful. And what's going to happen is that now Canada will put their hackles up. They will be on the defensive and they will be fighting for Canadian jobs against American economic imperialism. And they'll go and get closer to Europe and allies outside of the United States. They're going to be working more closely with Mexico, no doubt, the EU, the UK, Japan, Australia. This is not good for the United States. And my goodness, I don't know. It just makes you wonder what is going on in Donald Trump's head or what is being whispered into his ears. Now, just one more thing before I go. I talked about this yesterday, how Donald Trump's ambition to, I would say renovate the White House. It's not. It's actually, he's now fully knocked down the entirety of the East Wing. So the East Wing is no more. It looks like it's been blown up by a Kim Jong-un missile. It's gone. The East Wing is gone. And I said that it had gone up from 200 million to 250 million, this ballroom, to, he mentioned 300 million the other night. Now he's mentioned 350 million.
Have you raised the full 300 million needed to fund your? Have you raised the full 300 million needed to fund your ballroom? And how much specifically are you donating to this construction
raised,
project?
I think $350 million. All donor money and money that we put up, we've raised. It's going to be
building a ballroom for $350 million. Really? Wow. And it's just gone up 50 million in a couple of days. And that had already gone up 50 million in a couple of days before that. So he has literally, in something like 2 days, now pushed the price up $100 million. Just a couple of days of inflation there, $100 million. He's going to need to get as much economic activity going as possible. These halting trade deals with Canada might well hurt the pocket. I can't imagine he's going to pick up another 100 million from the private sector just in donations. But if he does, you've got to ask yourself, what are these donors getting in return? This could look a little bit like daylight corruption. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, I wanted to add that on because I did a video on this yesterday, even though most of what I'm talking about in this video obviously concerns the end of trade negotiations between the United States and Canada. Absolutely incredible. Based on their egregious behavior, that is the province of Ontario, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Wow. How thin-skinned can you get? Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.